Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing They Will Come Back to the Crossroads. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing They Will Come Back to the Crossroads. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you only have one question on your mind. Will my ex come back? In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 points to consider regarding why your ex will come back to the crossroads. So let's get straight into this. And point number 1 is, what are the crossroads? So the crossroads is a moment in a dumper's journey where they have to make a big decision. But they don't just come about this point once. No, a dumper reaches the crossroads 3 times. So let's first of all look into the first 2 times your now ex-dumper has reached the crossroads. So before you two got into a long-term romantic relationship, you and your now ex had obviously met in a certain way. Now, potentially, you were having some type of casual, lustful experience. If this was the case, then you didn't necessarily realise that you wanted to get into something more serious and long-term. Now, potentially, you and your now ex actually met in a more friendly setting, and everything was quite platonic for a while. But again, at some stage, this changed. So let's look at this moment. This is the first crossroads, and you as a dumpee was also hugely involved in this. You and your now ex got to the point where you was thinking, shall we take this to the next stage? Maybe you were platonic and you and your now ex was thinking, should we take this into a more romantic direction? Or potentially you were already quite lustful, but you thought it was just casual. And again, you got to the point where you were thinking, shall we take this to something a little bit more serious? Now, these moments occur when the level of romantic emotional attraction grows to a necessary high point. You and your now dumper both got to this stage. Perhaps you remember thinking back to when you probably spoke to friends or family about whether or not you wanted to take that next step. That's very natural. You had a connection on a certain level, whether it was a more platonic friendship or perhaps it was something a little bit more lustful and casual, but you wanted to make a change. So you probably spoke to people and asked their opinion. This, like I said, is very common. Now, your now ex-dumper would have gone through the exact same process. They would have been feeling a level of romantic emotional attraction growing and growing and growing to the point of where they was thinking, maybe we can take this in a different, more serious romantic direction. So when we consider this initial early moment in your connection, that is the first crossroads. It's a crossroads. It's a big decision. You're going one way or the other. Do you keep things the same, or do you take that chance to find long-term romantic happiness? And you and your now ex both took that leap of faith. And for a time, you and your ex was likely very happy, both feeling a high level of romantic emotional attraction for one another. Now, unfortunately, for various potential reasons, it got to the stage where your dumper's romantic emotional attraction level started to drop. And when it hit the necessary low point, they then entered their second crossroads. This was a time where they had to consider whether to continue on the path of your romantic relationship or to take a new direction. Now, if you're listening to this as a dumpee, what I'm telling you is something that you're probably thinking, yeah, and I know what happens next. And yes, unfortunately, it got to that stage where your now ex-dumper made the decision to gamble on taking a different path away from the relationship. Whether they weren't feeling fulfilled, whether they felt that you were treating them badly, of course, I don't know for certain from your perspective, but romantic emotional attraction was lost. Maybe they felt they just wanted to try something new, a different route in their life, or perhaps you took an action, maybe you cheated on them, maybe this was something regarding money, or you know what I'm saying, it could have been an action that you did which caused them to lose the attraction, or it could have just been growing apart. Either way, this unfortunately was the second crossroads, and where your ex-dumper got to that point where they made the decision to end the relationship. Now, you're listening to this podcast now as a dumpee, and you're thinking, so what is next? So, when we discuss the crossroads, what we are talking about here is when people ask me the question, will my ex come back? What I say is that they will return to the crossroads. They will have a moment where they return to this place for a third time. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about they will come back to the crossroads. And point number 2 is, when do they come back to the crossroads? So when we're talking about point number 2, we have to understand that in my belief, your ex-dumper will always have that moment where they come back to the crossroads. So when you're asking that question, well, when are they going to come back for a third time? It is going to happen. You know, I can't say when. I can't say whether it's going to be days, weeks, months, or years. What I can tell you is that from the average amount of time from my own research, it seems to be at least 6 months from the time of a breakup that they might get to that point where they enter the crossroads again. Now, you might be thinking, well, 6 months, gosh, I'm only a few weeks into my breakup journey and I'm already feeling like it's an eternity. How on earth am I supposed to get through all of these extra months? Now listen, it might sound like an eternity. It might feel like it has never been longer already, but let me tell you, the time does tick by, and this isn't something to be frightened of. You know, some people will suggest that you need to try to get your ex back within 30 days and that type of thing, but I do not believe in this. And I don't believe in it because I do my own research and I see dumpers returning to their dumpees after many, many months, if not years. Now, I'm not telling you to wait because there is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back. Nothing works 100% of the time and nothing fails 100% of the time. So you can't wait around, you can't clock watch, you can't assume that your ex-dumper is going to want to reconnect with you in a romantic way. We can't guarantee that they will want to reconnect with you and get back into a relationship. What I'm saying is that your ex-dumper will certainly return to the crossroads, the decision-making moment. Your ex-dumper will have that time where they are considering their options. It might be days, weeks, months, years. Now, I'm not saying they're going to make that choice where they want to get back into a relationship with you. And I'm not saying that by that stage you will even want them to. And that is why it's so important you live your life to the full. You concentrate on your own journey and your own path. And that's why I always say to people, if you want support going through breakup recovery, if you want to try and increase the chance of getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where you can speak one-on-one about your specific unique situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Because when we consider when will they come back to the crossroads, this is when the level of romantic emotional attraction in their mindset towards you has risen once again to the necessary high point. When we consider how and when this takes place, we have to realise that at the time of a breakup, the level of attraction was very, very low. That's why they ended the relationship. So it's got to regrow. And this isn't something which can be forced. You can't beg, you can't plead, you can't reason, you can't try and persuade somebody to feel romantic emotional attraction for you. It's got to be real, it's got to be authentic, it's got to grow naturally. And this is why the hints, tips, and advice that I give in my other podcasts can really try and give you that edge along with my audio coaching service to be more specific to help and support you. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, ring the bell for notifications, and check out all of my content. I've got hundreds and hundreds of podcasts to try and help you from all directions. Now, if you implement my version of a no contact rule, that is going to put you in the best possible position to grow that romantic emotional attraction in your ex's mind in a more steady way. You know, we're regrowing that attraction by implementing my version of a no contact rule. Then you need to implement the other hints, tips, and advice that I give to try and just increase that chance and just speed things along if possible. If and when your ex-dumper's romantic emotional attraction hits that high point that is when they're going to approach the crossroads in a much more positive perspective from your angle. Now, even if they don't hit the necessary high point that I keep talking about of attraction, they will likely still come to the crossroads, but from an angle which might not be as favourable to you. And they reach this perspective if their own life isn't going as well as they may have hoped. If their life isn't as shiny, isn't as exciting, isn't as fresh, isn't as new, if these things aren't happening on their own path, that again is when they will likely come to the crossroads. And that's why I believe they definitely will. Either they'll grow enough romantic emotional attraction for you, or their life won't be going the way that they hope. Either way, they're going to reach the crossroads. And that's why I think one way or the other, they're very, very likely to do so. Everybody reflects. Everybody has a moment where they consider. Everybody looks back to their past. It could be for even more reasons that I've just said. But if they get to a moment where they do start to even just daydream about it, think about it, ask other people's opinion about it, they will get to the crossroads. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast, about they will come back to the crossroads. And point number 3 is, what are the options at the crossroads? So when your ex is at the crossroads, they have 2 options. The first option is actually split into 2 different subcategories and consists of either texting you, calling you, or going to your house. Now, I've listed these possibilities in most to least likely. They are very unlikely to come to your house, but it's not unheard of. Your dumper is much more likely to call you, but by a big margin, your ex is much, much, much more likely to send you a text or use some type of messaging app. Now, all of these possibilities constituted as option A, path A at the crossroads. Option B is unfortunately that they don't contact you. So what we can see is that your ex will come back to the crossroads, but whether they go down the path of contacting you is dependent on the relationship, the breakup, and the aftermath. Your ex will never forget you, and one day your dumper will come back to the crossroads. Like I've said, either way, whether it's because the attraction's growing, whether because their life is just not going the way they hoped, maybe other potential reasons like their friends, their family mention you, ask them to consider the relationship and what went wrong. Whatever happens, I believe your ex, the dumper, will come back to the crossroads. But whatever path they choose will be dependent on the romantic emotional attraction they already have in the bank and how high the level actually is. But additionally, the memories and the feelings that can be created from when they are contemplating. Like I said, this will also be connected to the relationship, the breakup, and the aftermath. The relationship is about how long you were together, the memories you built, the feelings developed, and what you had between you both. The breakup is regarding how it went, what was said. Of course, a breakup is very emotional. Things may have been said that maybe you regret, maybe you don't regret them, but it could have been something which got a little bit out of hand with what you were saying to one another. And unfortunately, that can sometimes take a possibility away regarding what exactly was said. I can't predict, what happened within your breakup. But if we consider the relationship, if we consider the breakup, we then also have to consider the aftermath. And the aftermath is about how you as a dumpee has behaved since the breakup took place. Have you chased your ex? Have you begged, pleaded, reasoned? Have you knocked on their door? Have you not taken no for an answer? Are you being somebody who is now having a restraining order put on you? These are the things which are not going to help you in that cause. When your ex, the dumper, is thinking back and reflecting and wondering if they made the right choice, if they're then thinking, well, the relationship wasn't that long, the memories weren't that great, if I'm actually being honest, then the breakup was quite stressful and dramatic. Yes, every breakup is going to be emotional, but there were some really horrible things said from both of us. And now, when I consider the last few weeks and months, my ex, the dumpee, has not taken no for an answer. In fact, they've been a little bit scary, what they've kind of been doing and saying and behaving like. If your ex, the dumper, is thinking these things, then unfortunately, at the crossroads, they're going to be taking option B. They're going to be taking path B, and they're going to be walking down that route of never contacting you again. However, if they decide that when they combine the relationship, the breakup, and the aftermath, if they decide that the relationship had great memories, maybe you've got children together, maybe you had wonderful moments over many months or years, if they consider the breakup and think, yes, it was emotional, yes, we said a few things, but it was understandable. I broke their heart. I understand why they said what they said. If even think about the aftermath post-breakup and think, okay, maybe my ex-dumpee did send me a few messages, but eventually they did start to understand and respect my decision, and I've not actually heard from them in about 3 or 4 months, and I'm now starting to wonder what they're doing with their life now. If your ex-dumper is thinking in this kind of way, then they're much more likely to be taking path A. They're much more likely to be selecting option A, which is to contact you. And like I said, there is the subcategories. Are they going to be knocking on your door? Are they going to be calling you? Or are they most likely going to be sending you a text? Either way, this is when you and your ex could start to reconnect and get back together into a relationship. Whatever happens, I do genuinely believe your ex-dumper will come back to the crossroads. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.